thinks.
That's Trevor Phillips, and he's on to something here. He's also, in the past, been a nominee for Islamophobe of the Year. Can you hardly believe it? Our own Majid here on LBC has also been nominated. We'll look at that a little later, plus this.
Lots of people make mistakes. Lots of people do things in life and get in the wrong groove. But we don't think that is a reason why they shouldn't have a job.
It's criminal records time. How much should you have to reveal to an employer? We'll look at that, and we start here.
The downward pressure on wages is a trend and will only get worse if we continue to have absolutely open borders with the EU. This significantly affects British workers, especially those on low wages.
Yeah, come back to that in a second. We'll look into the cycling helmet high-vis debacle. If you're a driver, you will always have a big old list of rules that your two-wheeled friends should absolutely be adhering to. That's like being taxed off your own bike, wearing helmets and thick clothing, and a big old stamp on your back saying, "I'm here." There is a different side to the story of cyclists and safety. We'll look at that a little later with Carlton Reid from bikebiz.com on that point. 0345 6060 We are broadcasting on Facebook as well. The first section of this show is in moving pictures. Very exciting. It's like when TV first began, but it's the internet version of it. The evolution, if you like, of television. The next stage of television. We laugh at television here. If you go to facebook.com/LBC, you can see the visual interpretation and see for yourself what the vaguely acceptable face of an LBC presenter looks like. That's facebook.com/LBC. Now, here's a question. We've been in this territory, I don't know how many times. It takes on a newfound resonance, really, with some fairly senior figures chipping into the argument. Low-skilled immigration. Do you really think, with a straight face, that the UK can survive without unskilled immigration? With a straight, do you genuinely believe? Forget what you would like to believe. Ignore for a moment what you aspire to believe. Genuinely, right now, what would happen to the UK economy if we lost unskilled immigration? So that may well be people who work in elements of hospitality. It's not a pejorative term, by the way, unskilled. It just means that you may be doing the kind of job that wouldn't require necessarily a specific qualification. It could be fruit picking, it could be coffee bars, hospitality. There's a whole range of those kind of jobs. You know already, I think, instinctively what those jobs are. When we first debated this kind of thing, or when I first remember debating this sort of area, I remember somebody emailing in, and it was somebody pretty well known. It's extraordinary, having said that. I can't quite remember who it was, but it was either a politician or it was somebody who said, anybody that thinks that the United Kingdom needs hundreds of thousands of low-skilled immigrants is either brain dead or stupid or something like that. And it went on to embroider the point a little more than that. Since then, of course, we've been treated to a melee of debates and discussions about this, courtesy of the EU referendum. And every bigwig in town from the world of commerce and politics has chipped into this one. And what I find rather interesting is that mostly, even on the Brexit side of the argument, people tend to acknowledge that we can't really survive without low-skilled immigration. It wasn't that long ago, just a couple of years back, Ed Miliband was saying low-skilled immigration is too high. Today, a couple of senior Conservatives are backing a report calling for an end to low-skilled immigration after Britain leaves the European Union in order to honour the result of the referendum. Now, does that honour the result of the referendum? That presupposes that everybody who voted for that reason. Well, there might have been some of that. Was it exclusively that? I know some of my Remain colleagues who are slightly more hardened Remainers than me, looking at nobody in particular, but my producer, often think that this was, if everybody was brutally honest, this was really why everybody voted to leave the EU. It was about immigrants, wasn't it, Governor? That's what it was about, immigrants coming over here, picking our fruit, and all the rest of it. Ian Duncan Smith is the latest high-profile character. He's a former Tory leader, along with David Jones. You might not be familiar with Mr Jones, but he was a Brexit minister up until June. They said a forthcoming government policy document on immigration should set out plans to cut migration to mid-90s levels. The pair supported a paper sent to Downing Street by the Leave Means Leave. That's a pro-Brexit campaign group. I love the way that's put in brackets, in case we were in any doubt that the Leave Means Leave group were a pro-Brexit campaign. They're calling for ministers to stop low-skilled migration and to set criteria which would have to be met by highly skilled migrants seeking work permits following Britain's departure. OK, we are leaving, and that does mean that work arrangements would be rather different. But pretty much everybody that I speak to and listen to, even on the Leave campaign, acknowledge the need for low-skilled immigration. I mean, I think Boris Johnson is probably the greatest purveyor of that point, really. Certainly when he was the mayor. I think he even talked about amnesties for immigrants and stuff. But, I mean, it's just he's that kind of conservative. It's in his blood where immigration isn't part of what makes him a conservative, not really a factor. And I think he said, although he can't say it out loud too much, because, of course, the government have yet to get to that point where they've negotiated Brexit. That's what he said, yeah. Let illegal immigrants who've lived here in the UK for over 10 years stay. Don't know how you'd know that they've been here over 10 years. Because if they're illegal, then by definition, I would have thought you would. Somebody could have been here for 8 years and go, yeah, I've been here for 10. Prove it. Well, I kind of can't. But nonetheless, Boris Johnson is one of those many Brexit types who have argued, I think, fairly consistently that they would want pretty much everybody who's here to remain. But what's more interesting about this, and I think the farming fraternity, and remember, farmers are continually warning that food will, and I quote, rot in the fields and Britain will be unable to produce what it eats if the government cannot guarantee that growers will continue to have access to tens of thousands of EU workers after Brexit. The president of the National Farmers Union, this is the body's main union, of course, said just earlier this year that farmers and food processors, particularly in horticulture and poultry, were already having difficulty recruiting. So if you consider that Cornwall appealing to the government as crops rot in fields due to a shortage of migrant labour, that wasn't from 4 years ago, that was from 2 weeks ago. Can anyone with a straight face really say we don't need low-skilled immigration? Now, I'm basing this solely on listening to people like farmers. I'm listening to people who work in hospitality. I'm listening to captains of industry, chieftains in the world of commerce, politicians on all sides of the debate. And it seems to me that of all the areas, we've got lots of areas we can't settle where we're not quite sure. You know, if we change this law, will that happen? If we alter another law at this end, will it create an air bubble effect and create... But the one thing that I would say, above anything else, when it comes to low-skilled EU immigration, is that there is almost universal recognition, almost, because it's that other lot that I'd like to speak to, almost universal recognition that this country, any Western country, now needs low-skilled immigration. There's a variety of reasons for that. The kind of jobs, perhaps, that have been created, the kind of jobs that perhaps some locals no longer see as areas they want to work in. I've said this tirelessly. When I was a kid, people going fruit picking was very much a kind of working-class thing. It's what people did. During the school holidays, we would go strawberry picking down the road. That was a big thing to go strawberry. It was a great way to earn a few quid as well. It was back-breaking stuff, but it was fabulous. But certainly a memory I always have as a kid, and I always wanted my mum to do because it looked rather cool, was a load of weird... It sounds like I was born in the 50s when I tell this story, but I promise you, this was in the 70s and the 80s, and mostly in the 80s, when you'd have women, queuing up, ready for a truck that would come along in the morning and take everybody in the truck and take them to the potato field, which was, 3 or 4 miles out of town. They'd pick spuds all day and then come back. I thought that was an amazing job, an incredible job. I don't think that happens now because mostly Europeans, mostly Eastern Europeans, have taken up that particular area of the market. And I don't know whether Brits would any longer consider that a job they'd want to do. I've never got to the bottom, and I think many of you who listen to this regularly will know what I'm going to say, of the coffee shop dilemma. If you took every European worker out of coffee shops, would we have nobody working in coffee shop? Would they all close down? Who knows the reasons behind that, but what seems absolutely clear is that just about everyone and their uncle are in agreement that we need unskilled immigration. And again, I'll just define, unskilled is not a pejorative term. It just means people who are coming to work in, if you're, for example, you could be a Spanish student that thinks, I'll do a year over in the UK. I'll just I'll do some coffee shop work, I'll do some hospitality stuff. I don't need a skill for that. It's groups perhaps like that. 0345 6060 973. So Ian Duncan Smith and others are now saying that this is what we need to be doing. We need to look at reducing unskilled immigration. The problem is this. Firstly, Ian Duncan Smith and the other person I mentioned, David Jones, are, I consider, a little bit mad, okay? Not in the sense that they suck their thumb and howl at the moon, but mad in that kind of political sense, immovable, stubborn in the belief that they had probably many years ago, allergic to the idea that politics is an organic beast. Things change, ideas change, concepts change. Every chieftain of industry will now tell you the need for unskilled immigration. The place will fall apart without it. But apparently Ian Duncan Smith knows a little more than all those people do. Has Ian Duncan Smith ever run anything? He did, he was Tory leader for a while, wasn't he? He was great. 0345 6060 973. But he did rather well with his social justice stuff, to a degree. When he was in opposition, he was trawling TV studios, getting standing ovations for what he was doing. I'll never forget the schools edition of Question Time, where some mischievous producer obviously thought, let's get Ian Duncan Smith on, the old baldy right-winger, because the kids are going to eat him for breakfast in the audience. And there he was, talking about the need to get back to work and welfare dependency. He was the only one in the room that got a standing ovation. They had some trendy comedian on there, Davina McCall, and Duncan Smith was getting all the applause. A curious moment. Nonetheless, Mr. Duncan Smith is the latest person to add his name to this particular list. Do you think the UK can survive without unskilled immigration? 0345 6060 973. It's Late Nights with Ian Collins, LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell appeared yesterday to blame journalists and journalism after he was clearly unable to say how much Labour's plans to borrow billions of pounds would cost Britain. We need an opposition that is fully functioning, and we have a Shadow Chancellor where literally he cannot make the numbers add up. Believe me, it is very, very frightening that the man who would be Chancellor of the Exchequer, when asked the most basic questions, he can't get them right.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Hampton by Hilton. Book direct for the lowest price.
Every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Critics are falling in love with British movie sensation Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool.
That's Gloria Graham. Big name in black and white films.
Witness the extraordinary true story of a real-life Hollywood romance.
Won an Oscar too.
Radio Times calls it beautifully made, witty and incredibly moving. And The Guardian says there is tremendous warmth and tenderness to this sweet, sad love story. Don't miss Annette Bening, Jamie Bell and Julie Walters in Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool. In cinemas now. Rated 15.
Look, our lowest ever black tag prices on hundreds of products at Curry's PC World. Up to £500 off Samsung, LG and Sony TVs. See in store or look online. The 49-inch Samsung Smart 4K Ready HDR TV is only $479. There's up to £200 off Windows laptops from $299. And 10% off mark prices on over 1,000 large kitchen appliances. Top brands Bosch, Hotpoint, Samsung. See for yourself. At Curry's PC World, we help you get it right. Deal subject to availability.
Jack here has got Kev on the phone. As a PlusNet customer, he has lots of friendly people that have his back. Say hi, Kev.
Hi, Kev.
Hi?
He can call PlusNet any day of the week. They've already helped him pick a package, upgrade a package, check bills, move home, give him matrix, ordered SIMs, transferred numbers, added buttons, checked his connection speed. And Julie here even helped him settle on Mallorca for his next family holiday.
Don't forget the factor 30.
PlusNet has lots of friendly staff that just can't help but help. It's probably why they've bagged Uswitch as Best Provider for Customer Service Award. PlusNet will do you proud.
Fleet managers. Maybe you don't use fleet tracking because maybe your fleet seems safe and secure. Maybe your fuel costs seem okay. Maybe your drivers manage just fine without it. Maybe it's time to stop running your business on maybes. Fleetmatic's fleet tracking solutions can help you reduce your costs, serve more customers, and improve the safety of your employees' driving habits anytime, anywhere. Maybe that's worth a call. Text the word fleet to 66777 or visit fleetmatics.co.uk. Fleetmatics, a Verizon company.
I know what the plough looks like in the night sky. I know how Eskimos kiss. I know a time when a mullet wasn't a fish. And I definitely know this piece of music. But I don't know my state pension.
Find out more about your state pension and how much it should be. Get to know your pension. Visit yourpension.gov.uk.
In the heart of London, find their heart's desire. Discover the perfect present in the home of fine diamond jewellery.
Shine bright like a diamond.
It could only be Hatton Garden this Christmas. Visit hattongarden.shop.
Late Nights with Ian Collins on LBC.
And this is a genuinely interesting point from Terry in Milton Keynes, and I think it's completely right to make it, because I would scratch my head on this as well. Can anyone honestly defend 3 million EU workers doing low-paid jobs while taxpayers subsidise 3 million unemployed Brits? We end up paying twice, subsidising both groups. Although I think the unemployment figure is about half that. But I take the point, Terry, and I would have felt the same. You know, when I mentioned the email that we got some time ago when talking about this, suggesting that anyone who can defend low-skilled immigration in the kind of numbers we have, and the phrase is either brain dead, stupid, or both, or something of that order. But you have to listen to the amount of people in industry. I mean, it's not all cheap labour, surely. It's not all about that, or is it? You know, Jeremy Corbyn even has a view on this, that he thinks that low-skilled immigration is something that, you know, perhaps causes a problem when it artificially reduces the wages of certain Brits. He referred to the construction industry particularly. Don't go away, Dan. With you in a second. Martin is in Epsom. Martin, hello.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Obviously, Ian Duncan Smith, one of the potentially worst Conservative leaders in history.
You think?
Obviously, most of our immigration comes from outside the EU, so these people are barking up the wrong tree in the first instance. Secondly, if we wanted to reduce immigration, if I was a hardline anti-immigration right-winger, I would have voted Remain, because the government have always had the power to reduce EU immigration, to force EU immigrants to have something like 3 years' worth of savings saved up before coming here, and that any benefits that they claim in this country are paid out by their home government.
Yeah, but didn't David Cameron try to negotiate all of that? And
no, because we already had, Ian, we already had it. He tried to go away and negotiate something we already had. And obviously, he didn't tout the fact that we already had it. So you're talking about the existing agreement across all EU countries about how welfare works, depending on which country you're in. It's the same across the board. But how welfare works, how health provision works, generally the social system, yeah.
So there is. The point being is there is criteria if you want to come to this country from elsewhere. You don't just walk in and say hello.
Precisely, but you see, the reason why the government haven't tackled this or immigration from outside the EU is because we're at full employment. We're at something like 44% unemployment, which is the right amount of unemployment that you need a talent pool to pull from, right? So we're at full employment. Now, if immigration was having some sort of negative effect and everyone by the way, it is a myth, this wage depression thing of the lower working classes, right? It's a total myth. If that was actually happening, the government would have done something about it, but they haven't, because we're at full employment. 2/3 of immigrants from the EU that come here are employed, and that third that aren't, those benefits are paid by other governments. So,
hang on, are you seriously saying that no EU national coming to this country receives no welfare from this country?
Oh, I'm sure they do, but they don't have to. Our government isn't forced to pay that, and it wasn't forced before, and it will not be forced, obviously, after Brexit. 70% of our economy is services. That's your coffee shops, that's your restaurants, but mostly your bankers, right? Mm-hmm. So if we start taking away the staff that man 70, or woman, pardon me, don't want to be accused.
No, it's fine.
Let's just call it man, the 70% of our most profitable business sector of this country. I mean, you'd be mad, and that ties in with your argument that these people are mad, and that Brexit was an emotional decision, not a logical one.
Let me stay there, Martin. Let me bring in Dan in South Kensington. You've got a different view on this, Dan. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, no, I was just I was listening to your programme. I was interested because everything I hear from my friends in sort of industry and that sort of thing, they're all moving towards robotics to replace low-skilled labour. And it just struck me that it doesn't strike me as mad for people to say, oh, we need less lower-skilled labour coming into England and having to... effectively, you're taking responsibility for these people's lives, when in fact there may be a vastly reduced amount of work available for them pretty soon.
So you think it's kind of academic
level? I'm totally non-political, but from a pragmatic level, it looks to me when I look forward into the next 10 years that sort of robotics, computers, everything seems to be taking over what was menial jobs.
I mean, it's a side point, Martin. What do you think of that? There's bound to be fewer of these certain kinds of jobs because of the new 21st century workplace.
I'm going to be really boring here and agree with Dan, I'm afraid. It's not going to be record-breaking radio.
That's not going to end up on a trail, is it, anytime soon?
It's not going to go viral on Twitter, no. Dan's absolutely right. Robotics and AI are taking over numerous jobs, but you are wrong to assume that it is only low-skilled jobs. You've got lawyers that are being put out of work, paralegals and teachers. And if you're not careful, Ian, radio presenters, I think you'll be all right on the radio presenters. And I think that the robots and the AI will create new jobs as they remove other jobs. They will, like the Uber drivers, you kiss them goodbye. And the taxi drivers, I think... Well,
I mentioned this last week, Martin. There's a belief that what you said there is kind of up there with climate change, denying that this is not a revolution that will create and throw up a whole new set of skills and places in the workplace. But in fact, let's get used to the idea of huge swathes of people losing their jobs.
Well, exactly. That's why, in my opinion, the tube drivers striking isn't about the train drivers striking isn't about safety. It's about the fact they know their jobs are gone in the next 5 years.
Yeah, there's probably something in that. Dan, let me just bring you back to the where we started on this. As you said, you won't make it a political point, just a pragmatic one. I mean, at the moment, though, while you're on, employers seem to be saying, look, we need low-skilled immigration. Do you see that or do you sense that the kind of jobs we're talking about here can only be filled by people outside the UK?
No, I think they'll only be saying that as long as it's cost effective. The moment you can find something that's going to outperform a man's wage, that'll happen.
And listen, your line is just cracking up. Dan, thank you. Martin, as well. Great call to start us off, Martin. Thank you for that, guys. Gareth says, regarding low-skilled immigration, down here in Cornwall, a high percentage of jobs are low-skilled and low-paid, but we hardly have any immigrants, so the locals do the jobs. I get paid around $18,000 a year. For Cornwall, that's good. The reason some farmers like immigrant labour is because they live on site in a caravan and don't have the outgoings that locals have, so can afford lower pay. That is always the consideration on these things. This in from Debbie. The minimum wage has kept wages low. That needs to go, and immigration control properly anywhere in the world. Thank you for that. This one is from Anthony. Hold the front page. Captains of industries and Tory grandees want to retain cheap labour in order to maximise profits. Who would have thought it? I mean, it's not as if these giant companies squirrel away their profits in secret accounts to avoid paying tax. How did we manage for all these years before free movement? I mean, there's something in that, but I think in fairness, there is another school of thought where you have people like Ed Miliband and Jeremy Corbyn wading in to the low-skilled argument, suggesting that it could either be too high. Mr. Miliband made that point just before the previous general election when he wanted to become Prime Minister, and Jeremy Corbyn has talked very openly about his concerns. The construction industry was one area that he picked out as being perhaps an area that certainly feels and could be stacked against indigenous workers because of the high amount of EU workers that are brought in en masse via agencies and things like that. So his point wasn't clearly anti-foreigner. It was a wider point, in fact, about how companies deal with this stuff. You may remember Amber Rudd suggested at one point that companies should be named. They should actually have to tell us how many foreign workers they have. For some reason, Amber Rudd's attempts to identify employers who were over-employing foreigners got somehow mistranslated as an excerpt from Mein Kampf, if you remember. I have no idea how Corbyn got away with exactly the same thing as Amber Rudd was saying. It was off the scale, really, but there you go. 0345 6060 973. More of your calls on this in just a moment. I'm certainly basing my view on just about every, and I know what our previous emailer just said, Anthony, that was being, understandably fairly cynical about the motivation of big business. But we are told there's no jobs that are being lost here in terms of, or there's no wage that's being lost by local workers, that it isn't true that employing immigrant workers keeps down the cost of wages. But who knows? I mean, there is another view on that. I mean, that's the point that Anthony, that our previous emailer made from Cornwall, that it does almost precisely that. 0345 6060 973. Certainly when I talk to captains of industry and people on this programme, and I hear others talk about it, even if you're a Brexiteer, there's almost a universal belief that you need lots and lots of unskilled labour from Europe to keep going. Back on the phones with you in just a few moments' time. Also to come this evening.
Lots of people make mistakes. Lots of people do things in life and get in the wrong groove. But we don't think that is a reason why they shouldn't have a job.
That's the head honcho from Timpson's. They are known for employing people who've just completed a prison sentence. It's an initiative, a scheme, if you like, the Timpson's. Very much a traditional British company. They have had a policy for some time now to recruit a certain amount of people from prisons. However, the criminal record system, we understand today, is hampering the rehabilitation of ex-offenders. Nearly 750,000 convictions that were revealed to employers each year are more than a decade old. So you're talking about somebody who did something 10 years ago and nothing since. Should that still be revealed to a potential employer? Or does it depend on the offence? We'll look at that in just a little bit. And advice for cyclists. It's getting even more confusing. This weekend you might have noticed there were suggestions that while cycle helmets offer protection against certain types of head injury, wearing high-vis clothing may in fact increase the risk of being hit by a vehicle. Are you confused? We'll hear more from Carlton Reid, editor-at-large of BikeBiz.com, in just a couple of moments on LBC. First, though, the news headlines from Paul Smith.
2 young brothers are among 5 people killed after a stolen car hit a tree in Leeds last night. 2 boys aged 15 have been arrested. Theresa May is being urged by the Irish EU Commissioner to stay in the single market or customs union. He says he'd be willing to veto talks moving on to discuss